Some cases were never solved. Some calls were never traced.
Deep in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia sits a village that doesn't appear on modern maps. No tourists visit, and no hotels exist. The town is governed by one unbreakable law. After 10 p.m., not a single person steps outside their home. The residents call the entity that enforces this curfew the Walker. For over 50 years, anyone caught outside after the bell has vanished. There are no bodies, no physical evidence, and no witnesses on the record. In the summer of 2021, 5 college students from Ohio arrived to document the village. Jake, Ryan, Mia, Brandon, and Sophia brought high-end recording equipment with the goal of proving the legend was a fabrication and uploading the footage for internet fame. The group was met with total silence. When they asked about the legend, the villagers walked away. One elderly woman eventually approached them with a single instruction: leave before dark. She whispered that the entity knows exactly when strangers arrive. Armed with cameras and a plan for a viral video, the students viewed the village as a set for a debunking project. They treated the woman's warning as a local superstition, focusing on their recording equipment while ignoring the fact that 50 years of disappearances remained unsolved. At 9:47 p.m., the group settled into an old farmhouse on the edge of town. They set up their security monitors and checked their batteries, treating the silence of the village as the perfect backdrop for their investigation. At exactly 9:58 p.m., the village lockdown begins. Every resident disappears indoors, and houses simultaneously shift to a locked state. At 10 p.m., the church bell rings 3 times, signaling to the forest that anything left outside is available for the hunt. By staying active and visible while the rest of the village went dark, the students inadvertently separated themselves from the community. Without realizing it, they had positioned themselves as the only available targets in the village. At 10:13 p.m., the group heard footsteps on the dirt road. The sound was slow and heavy, moving toward the farmhouse until it stopped directly on the porch. Then came 3 slow knocks. Jake checked the front security monitor. Through the static, the camera showed a figure standing at least 8 feet tall. Its body was unnaturally thin, with arms that reached nearly to the floorboards. Ryan ignored the warnings and pulled the living room curtain aside to see for himself. The creature turned instantly, locking its gaze onto the window and proving it knew exactly where Ryan was standing. The creature began scratching the exterior walls of the house. Moments later, it started calling out the names of the group members. It didn't use a monstrous growl. It used the exact voices and accents of their parents and siblings back in Ohio. The entity made no attempt to force the door. It relied on the familiar voices of loved ones, waiting for the students to experience a moment of panic or empathy that would lead them to turn the lock from the inside. At midnight, the farmhouse power failed completely. In the total darkness, a heavy thud shook the floor. The group heard slow, deliberate footsteps pacing across the second story, directly above their heads. Jake and Ryan ran upstairs and found the bedroom window shattered. Brandon was gone. There was no struggle or sound, only a set of long footprints with too many toes, leading away from the house and into the tree line. Shortly after, Ryan heard Brandon's voice calling from the roof, begging for help. Despite Jake's attempt to stop him, Ryan threw open the front door and ran into the yard. His shouting was cut off by a single scream, followed by absolute silence. The loss of 2 group members in under an hour demonstrated the reality of the village's rules. Their technology and their numbers were useless against a predator that utilized the environment and their own emotions to isolate them. By 2:03 a.m., the creature returned. It stood beside the farmhouse, holding Ryan's camera in its long fingers. It stared through the window at Sophia, watching her closely as she sat paralyzed by the knocking. The knocking continued for nearly an hour, accompanied by the overlapping voices of Ryan and Brandon pleading to be let in. Sophia eventually broke. She sprinted to the door, convinced her friends were dying on the other side. As she opened the door a few inches, a long, pale hand shot through the narrow crack. The creature forced the door open, and stepped into the farmhouse, its head nearly touching the ceiling. Under the flashlight beams, the creature's face shifted rapidly. It cycled through the features of Brandon, then Ryan, and then several strangers. Finally, the skin settled into a perfect replica of Sophia's own face, just as it moved toward her. The creature carries the features of everyone it has taken, reflecting them back at the survivors. It uses these familiar faces to bridge the gap between the forest and the farmhouse, relying on the person's instinct to help their friends to bypass the final lock on the door. Jake and Mia escaped through the back door and ran toward the center of the village. They headed for the church, the only building that remained lit while the rest of the town was shrouded in darkness. Inside, they found the village elder waiting. He explained that the town's survival for the last 50 years depended on a single principle: a life for a life. The village buys its own safety by providing the creature with a steady stream of outsiders. By allowing the entity to focus on travelers who don't know the rules, the residents ensure the walker never has to look for a way into their own homes. Jake and Mia left the village at dawn, but the creature's interest didn't end at the town line. 6 months later, Mia vanished from her apartment without a trace. The only thing police found was a message written on her bedroom wall. The village of 10 o'clock serves as a buffer between the modern world and an apex predator. Once the creature recognizes a face, it follows. In this town, the bell doesn't just mark the time, it marks the beginning of a hunt that only ends when the creature has claimed what it's owed.